Okay. So I do want to get into one question about evolution. That, there's no, as far as I know, there's no evidence of spontaneous generation in one complex life form from inanimate matter. So how do we explain, like if we're going to subscribe to the idea of evolution happening in the Torah, how would such a thing, or what evidence do we have that this concept is even possible? And, is it a proven fact?
Well, I would say I would not use the word evolution. I call it development. Evolution becomes a loaded term. Evolution, as it's been described to me by, I always say, of course, there was 4 persons who work in the field. Okay, not at the same time, but the 4 that I mentioned over the decades, they all said essentially the same thing. Evolution is a 2-stage process. Random mutations in the sex line change the nature of the progeny that are being born. And some will be born like cheetahs, some will be born fast and some will be born slower, some smarter, some dumber, some stronger, some weaker. And it's pretty clear that the stronger, smarter, faster ones are going to get more food for the young than the dumb, slow, and so the second stage would be that the ones that are more fit will have more children and therefore always becoming in that direction. Which are important to see the difference in this description that I just said. The first stage is, and always it was said this way to me, but my whole sampling is 4 scientists, but they were so identical. Random mutations in the sex line. The key word there is random. The second stage of survival is not random at all. Strong lions eat weak lions. That's just what lions do. Guilty of anything, that's what lions do. Strong lions eat weak lions. Okay, so that's logical. That's not random. But you would say, but what made this set of lions be stronger than the other one, being born stronger, is that they had mutation to the gene that made them stronger. But the question comes back to the fact that are these mutations random or not? And if you look at the flow of Simon Conway-Morris has a wonderful book about this development. Simon Conway-Morris is probably the most important living paleontologist today. He's the person that discovered the nature of the Cambrian explosion of life when all the phyla appear suddenly out of the blue. Okay, science calls it the Big Bang of animal evolution. And he is the paleontologist that first, with a colleague, discovered the nature of the fossils. The fossils were known, but it wasn't understood. And he says he's convinced. But he says something like this in the introduction. If you are a creationist or some of that sort, I suggest you put my book back on the shelf. Evolution is true. It's the way of the world. But that evolution acts completely freely, that it is guided by a set of rules that determine what type of mutations can take place. And even Stephen Jay Gould in his writing said the same thing, that to him, and he's when we talk about this, sees the Bible as literature, but not necessarily divine. He said that there seems to be something in nature that challenges and directs the flow of life. And that's the same thing that we're saying here, that the laws of nature do not seem to be that the flow is random, as Conway-Morris said, that you have this vast forest of possibilities, and 99.9999% of those possibilities are lethal or useless. And there's 1 or 2 minuscule, 0.0001% of the possible mutations will give you a benefit. And as he calls it, that nature has this way of discovering the path through the forest that will lead you, obviously not, lead you to the mutations that are beneficial. And he says that's what he says. He said so he differentiates between random evolution and guided evolution. So if we can use the word evolution, that's why I don't use the word evolution. I use the word development. Life developed from the simple to the complex, 100%. The Torah says it day by day. You see, was the development random? No. Can we prove that it was random? No. So if there are, so then the argument comes back. There are 2 points I'd like to make out. Just a bit of your time. 2 points back. That if it's random, so if God is so clever, so why are there, I'm just going to put out a slide I want to show him. If God is so clever, so why is this the case? Does this show up on, can you see that picture on the, it's Technology Review, that's the M.I.T. Magazine. Caltech has, every university has its own magazine. So MIT is Technology Review. Is life the product of a grand designer? So here's God designing people. Well, what do you think all these things on the bottom are? Failed designs. Does that mean that there really isn't a God as a designer? Why are there, the dinosaurs? If God's so magnificent, so why are these failed designs? What about the dinosaurs? Would it ever be the case that God, who designs the world, would have, you call it an error, and have to press the reset button? And of course, so for that, I don't look at nature. I want to know the nature. That's why I wrote the book, God According to God. What does the Bible tell me about God? Well, does God ever press the reset button? You betcha. When? We just got done reading about it a week or two ago. People are living to 900 years. Forget whether people could live to 900 years. It's an irrelevant question, okay? It's in the text. People living to 900 years. A lousy idea. Simple as that. And God admits it. Nechamti. God says, Nechamti. I regret. What English translation you can find that doesn't say regret? Nechamti. Regret having made. God has regrets. Well, according to the Bible, God has regrets. Maybe more than God in the Bible, but I'll go with the Bible. God says Nechamti several places. This is the reset button, brings on the flood. Forget even if there was a flood or not. We have made discussions. I'm not getting to that. I'm getting the fact that the Torah includes this to show you that there can be failed designs, and God presses the reset button, and lifespans drop. And lifespans drop from, just looking for a slide that my son Joshi, now he's a world class, he should be back surgeon. He's searched, he's called all around. And anyway, Joshi plotted them for me. I'm just looking for them. Oh yeah, here it is, right here. It's right here. These are the data from the text. I don't know how clear it is, but these are death ages. Birthing ages follow the same. These are from Adam to Noah. People living to 900 years. Never, ever in this discussion worry about people can live to 900 years. Not. The key is the text brings them down. The Bible brings it. Flood now drop. Lifespans drop to 100, 120 numbers we know today.
Right.
People were a loser, and God says Nechamti, redirects the world, and suddenly you got 90-year-old people. That seems to work a bit. Not well. So far, we haven't reached the number of the ages that the number of years that went by. So the fact that God had destroys the dinosaurs is completely in accord with the flood. So this idea of failed designs, is 100% biblical. 100% biblical. These are failed design. Here's the dinosaurs right here. Okay. The dinosaurs appear about 300, the numbers are out of in my head, in the order of between about, I think about 250, 200 or so, 300 million years ago. I apologize, the number's not right in my head at the moment. They coexist finally, then they coexist actually with mammals for a while. And then about 65 million years ago, a force from outer space destroys the dinosaur. Meteor. The data are very strong because the level of at the level underground, the deeper you dig in, the older, the far back into history you're going. At the level of about 65 million years ago, worldwide, there's a level of destruction. Under than that, lower than that, there are big animals and little animals. Above that level of destruction, about 60, there are only little animals. All the big animals are gone. And then into the dinosaurs.
Wow.
Made it through. But the big dinosaurs. So that was a force from outer space. The nature of the debris in there, and a special iridium, a very rare earth on the Earth, but enriched in certain meteorites. If you calculate the amount of iridium in this like an onion, this layer 65 million years ago, how much. It would take a meteor about 10 kilometers in diameter, exploding somewhere above the Yucatan, it's thought to be now. And the Earth must have rung like a bell, for the boomers boom, and essentially a nuclear winter for 6 months, because we know how long dust remains in the atmosphere. About 6 months, there'd be no sunlight.
Oh, wow.
So temperatures dropped, they're all big animals. It's very similar to the data that we just found in stone. This made this news in the States also. The 23 universities participated in this work. They used the Torah for where they thought Saddam was, and they start digging in there, and they find a destruction layer. Forget the Torah, forget that. And what they find is a layer of ash. They find shards of clay that are glass on one side, which detect at this layer. The layer happens to date back to the time of Abraham, by the way. It's very interesting, the dating. But the only reason digging there is from the Torah, but it's reported, it's either Science or Nature, of the two leading journals. The Orthodox actually say, you have to admit, the description of this destruction is very much like what you have in the Bible, which must have choked in their throat to have to say that, but they're honest people. But the digging there is because the Torah said to dig there. Where stones, the destruction, and I think of them. There's many accounts on the web now. It's easy to find out and it's a meteor burst, explodes, and what do you get? Stones from the sky. Exactly the description of the Bible. Stones and fire fall from the sky. Salt. Everything there is found. But what's most interesting to me, at least, is that one of the shards, these pieces of clay that they sent for analysis to a lab. I think it was at the university in Tucson, Arizona, the University of Arizona. I think the woman who's an expert in high energy, high temperature, she works with atomic bombs, said the only place I've ever seen this was from a nuclear reaction, that you suddenly have this burst, is very short, like for a few seconds or so, super high temperature. And that's exactly the nature of an atomic blast. But it's also the nature of a meteor explosion of a kilometer or so above the Earth. It matches exactly. You really, if you haven't seen it, you guys, I urge you, Benzi and Ben, how's that? If you haven't read it, make sure you do. It's all over. And don't go to the religious sites, go to the science sites of it. And they'll tell you there. It looks just like what you read about in Genesis. And it dates to Abraham.
Wow.
The layer dates to Abraham.
I'm definitely going to check that out.
Yeah, well, I know we're strapped for time right now, so I was going to ask you about the fine-tuning argument, because another famous atheist, Christopher Hitchens, kind of admitted that that's something that they have to grapple with, and it's not so trivial that you could just reject. But I think you kind of touched on the fine-tuning argument anyway, saying how amazingly harmonious the universe is. But I wanted to ask you about the multiverse theory, because it's become quite popular, and you can even give a short answer, but I feel like it may be like blatant apologetics. They're trying to move the goalposts, because they're saying, hey, the universe doesn't really have a beginning because there's multiple universes. So
our universe has a beginning, but there are other universes. That's what it said.
Right.
Our universe can have a beginning, but there's gazillion other different laws of nature, and ours is a winner. All those others, maybe there's another winner also. You'll never know, because you can't see out of your universe.
Exactly.
You can see out of your universe, you'd still be in your universe. It's not like another galaxy. We can see billions of galaxies, but that's our universe. They're talking about other dimensions. We say length, width, and height. You know what they say? Ziggly, and not that, but diggly. The word doesn't even mean anything to us for the dimensions of those universes, because we can only think in time, space, and matter.
Right. So
would have a totally different lexicon. Diggledy, doggledy, and dooggledy. Oh, of course. Well, you got diggledy, you're going to get doggledy. I'm not just that they have a different language, but they wouldn't use time, space, and matter. They'd have something else. We talk about time, space, and matter, but they might have something we can't. It doesn't fit into here. But that's exactly what Scientific American, better than scientific. Bernard Carr, world famous astrophysicist. If you don't want, I'm quoting him, if you don't want God, you better have a multi-universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't want God, you better have a multi-universe, because you can't explain our universe.
There's more. That's the thing. There's actually more evidence for the creator, for God, than there is for a multiverse theory.
Right.
It's impossible to prove.
The evidence towards the creative aspect in this world
Yeah.
is forcing the multi. It's because it's so overwhelming that this.
Yeah. And as it says in Psalm 85, the truth shall spring from the earth. The more that we study, like this discussion of stone, and now they find a signet in the old city as David. I mean, we finally know that David actually, the Torah always assumed it, but we never had it. We have the name of one of the judges from the time of Gideon. From English and Gideon, you have one of the judges. It only appears here. No, none of the other in the Torah. Whether that's him. What I'm saying is the more that we dig into the earth, the more we find that the story in the Torah is valid. So why wouldn't the rest of it be valid as well? But the only way you can get out of a God is no other way.
So we have one last question. So it's probably the funnest question.
For which Benjy was saying, the evidence for God is better than for multiverse. There's no data for multiverse except we're perfect. Those are the data for. We are perfect. So there must be others non-perfect. Logic is embarrassing.